So a couple years ago, I covered several games many would consider as Gran Turismo clones, titles developed to capitalize on the success of the simcade boom that started during the very late 90s to mid 2000s. Among that selection was a title I found to be a Capcom developed racing game, which was incredibly rare as the company was better known for their action games, arcade fighters, and the survival horror genre. At the time, I genuinely thought Auto Modellista was the only racing game they made during that period of time, but to my surprise, in 2003 there was another title. There were several reasons for why this one is significantly more obscure. For one, the game is titled in Japan as Circus Drive, and I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean exactly. Second, the developers of this game are listed simply as Digital Studio, which certainly sounds vague. They have no other credited game beyond this title, and it's also an original Xbox exclusive. If Moby Games is to be believed, most of the staff working on this game were later involved in other Capcom leading franchises such as Resident Evil and Monster Hunter. That makes it very likely that this so-called digital studio is either a placeholder name or the name of a specific development team within Capcom that got disbanded or reformed after the development of this title. In relation to the intro, this game is basically yet another Gran Turismo clone through and through, down to some surprisingly similar details. In fact, that similarity may be visible immediately from the main menu, with the appearance of an arcade mode and a simulation mode. Okay, it might not be named simulation mode, but you and I, we know exactly it's a career mode. As far as I can tell, the arcade mode itself is pretty similar to every other Gran Turismo clone out there, with freedom to select whichever cars and tracks to play around with. The only thing that caught my eyes here is the one make race settings, which is self-explanatory, but in the career mode, an economy system is in place, so we're starting off from the bottom with Group C. The game features 22 different brands, from usual Japanese ones, some American, and a couple of European brands. The selection here is rather modest if I have to be honest. It's definitely unsurprising to see the Japanese brands featuring more models since, you know, Capcom. Although there are some missing brands like Suzuki or Daihatsu, so there are no K-car representation unless we're counting the Miata. But the American and European selection are certainly too limited. We're only given 50,000 DP, which I'm assuming abbreviates to dollar points, and that's only enough to pick a fraction of Group C selection. Most of the selection in this class falls into that average sedan class with a couple of cars you'd probably consider as sporty, albeit on the lower side of the power scale. Both B and A groups are mainly filled by sports cars, while supercars and hypercars fill the titular Group S roster with cars by Rough or Celine. So groups are effectively just a way to separate cars based on performance tiers. A bit of a pet peeve of mine though, for some reason each group label is only visible when looking into the car's details, so there's a lot of opening and closing UI sections, aka the classic 2000s Japanese racing game problem of annoying UI navigation. But the car collection screen is pretty cool. We get to see the full car selection in this page and choose whichever car to drive. The way it's laid out seems to be directly inspired by Gran Turismo's Tokyo Geneva concept that was just released a year prior to this. That being said, the price jumps are quite insane, going from 5 digits in prices to 6 digits on the next group, to reaching the millions to the hundreds of millions not soon after. It's rather overwhelming, like the kind that makes the brain start screaming that there might be some kind of heavy grind involved somewhere down the line. But assuming you've chosen your starter car, it's time to tackle some of the so-called challenges. There's 3 to be exact, but honestly, only one of them truly mattered: Championship. It's just a basic championship function that is split per car group. There isn't really any other things to watch out for in this section. There aren't more than one set of championships per group, and there doesn't seem to be any randomization either beyond whichever car will be our opponents per race. Though you might want to read this very innocuous fine print that states what's the minimum requirement to progress. You can tackle the championships as a back-to-back race with a scoring system, or individually if you feel the need to use them to grind some cash, as the rewards for winning are rather high. First place in Group C alone grants 20,000 DP, and in a single championship that's already double the star cash. That being said, the cheapest car for the next class is priced at around 200,000 DP. So this is how the game forces you to grind, by making you finish championships twice in a row. However, that's pretty lame, so I decided to be a bit of a daredevil by attempting to do Group B races with an upgraded Group C car. I'm not gonna lie, it is pretty tough, but compared to how it was when I used the designated group car, that is kind of the problem with this game. The difficulty is a bit on the easier side, but every now and then the game will spawn in a car with significantly overpowering performance, so kinda like Gran Turismo I suppose. Some parts of the game are heavily inspired by things, as subtle as the way camera movement is handled and UI design, but other stuff like this weird camera with an additional cinematic view is a bit unique. And what about the handling? It's pretty far off. Cars in this game turn very easily, and simply decelerating or braking will make the car turn even more or enter a power slide. You don't even need to engage with the handbrake most of the time. Don't get me wrong though, it's not a bad handling system, but certainly more accessible than what I initially thought, though it can still produce a bit of an issue if you're not careful. So tuning for the most part is rarely useful unless you really want to squeeze out that min-max 1% extra time out of the record. Even most of the upgrades feel so non-existent outside of the engine upgrades, despite the asking price. Speaking of price though, the price for winning the next set of group races is now at 200,000 per race. That is an increase by 10 times compared to Group C, an extra digit even, and could easily purchase 3 Group C vehicles, or almost enough for a single Group B car. Even if you finish second, you'll only get half, which is still 100,000 DP. That's the same amount of DP you'd get from a full championship, and third place is half again, down to 50,000. Then suddenly it all clicks into place. Why the prices between cars jump so heavily between each other. The money you earn on higher groups are significantly boosted by some absurd multipliers, and it basically will continue to rise with each group, where the races continue to become faster and faster, making each future race into another desired piggy bank, all in order to get more cars for the collection page. Now there are the other 2 challenges next to the championship, so we'll look into them first. The one next to championship is weirdly titled as Line. It sounds a bit weird, but the gist is that it's a time trial challenge. It's not just about finishing quickly though. The tracks are scattered with these greenish light particles that we can collect, and these are laid out like some proper driving line. So this thing can sort of be used as a training exercise to get accustomed to the cars and tracks. The amount of these light particles collected determines the amount of DP the game will reward by the end, and if you manage to get all of them, then a perfect collection multiplier is awarded. But if I have to be honest, it's absolutely not worth it if it means losing enough time to be knocked out of the ranked time record, as dropping out means a massive penalty of 80% cut, compared to getting bronze, which is the normal multiplier, silver doubling the amount, and gold quadrupling the total DP earned. Just like with championships though, using faster car groups means extra multiplier count. That being said, this challenge mode has one bit of uniqueness to it, coming from the randomized track selection. Unlike championships, you don't really have a choice to select tracks and layouts, so whether or not it will be a long time trial with more or less items to collect is under the mercy of the randomization. This is probably a good time to mention the track variety as well. If you're doing a lot of this line activity, you likely wonder why a lot of the tracks are very similar. So in total, there's only 3 different areas in total. I was pretty surprised when hearing it too, because even the majority of GT clones during this era would have at least significantly more options than that. This covers the Tokyo Shibuya City track race, being the most metropolitan area environment for this game. There's Surfer's Paradise, which is supposed to be based on the same city track used in Queensland, Australia. And finally, every F1 fan's favorite historical heritage, Monaco. Each area has 6 different layouts, but that's being rather generous by counting the reverse layouts as well. In reality, there's 3 layouts. 2 short ones labeled as Part A and Part B that can go towards different sections or only using half of the entire layout, and then a full track section, with only Shibuya having a Part C layout. So in total there should be 10 different racetracks, 20 with the reverse layouts. These tracks are pretty wide if I have to be honest. I mean, just look at it. Even Monaco somehow has been widened enough that it could fit at least 4 of the current year F1 cars side by side, which really helps with making the game even more accessible to casual gamers. Though certain sections will still be something to challenge the player's mastery through chicanes and narrow corners. Out of the 3 areas, I think they are kinda equally as interesting visually, being a collection of city tracks from different areas of the world. Though honestly, the color palette used is rather boring. I don't know why, but the color feels washed out. Like back to Monaco again, it feels a lot more gray than any other video game interpretation of the track. Kinda feel the same way for Surfer's Paradise as well, even if it's way better. But at least Shibuya is pretty colorful. Even if it's not really as colorful as I would expect considering the amount of stuff they usually have over there. It might just be because of the original Xbox limitation, but I'm not entirely sure when Project Gotham Racing 1 existed on the same platform. Back onto the initial topic though, we have one last challenge. This one is simply titled as Duel. The name is rather self-explanatory, but the rest isn't. What this is a system to unlock special pre-tuned vehicles that you may have noticed from the car collection screen. There's no way to purchase these cars, so Duel is the only way to ever truly obtain them, making it important if you're a completionist. These duels also do not reward anything monetary, so you won't get anything to directly help purchase vehicles anyways. I'm guessing this is Capcom's answer to the price car system, turning it into another game of car collection to add more to the roster. The way this works is every single pre-tuned car can be obtained by defeating it in a 1v1 scenario against 3 different vehicles that you must purchase and own first. So getting these cars is definitely not free in the slightest. Normally the cars challenged and unlocked are of the same group as the one you're using to challenge them anyways, so there's a slight upgrade from the stock dealership cars. And no, you can't use the same car more than once, so the game is forcing you to grind and purchase all the different cars to do this. It seems like a nice system at first, but its presence is rather paradoxical in a sense. To unlock these pre-tuned cars, you need to purchase 3 different cars of the same group that are listed. Obviously, the best way to do this is by farming cash on the higher group races or line challenges, since the multipliers are absolutely busted for buying lower tier vehicles. But by that nature, you don't really get any benefit from these pre-tuned vehicles since, well, you already have a faster car and a better avenue to collect cash anyways. So in the end, these pre-tuned cars just end up collecting dust as a collectible trophy more than something to actually drive. I guess it's pretty okay if you're using it to unlock more cars in the multiplayer section or just driving for fun, but with how steep the cash increases are between groups, you're really just driving them for the sake of having fun. That being said, the duels are the most challenging piece of content in the game and arguably the funnest in a way. These guys are not pushovers, so you'll need to drive very well or be willing to be a bit of a dirty driver. But that kinda goes back again to the whole paradoxical nature. Being rewarded with an arguably obsolete car for doing hard content doesn't feel as worth the time and effort if you're not doing it strictly for personal enjoyment. All I'm saying is that this could have been designed way better. If anything, this is a system that would have been benefited with a more expansive or effective upgrade system, possibly one that allows cars to move between groups via upgrades. That way you can use the pre-tuned vehicle to push it beyond its initial tier and use them as an entry point to the next set of groups. Another thing to discuss, I suppose, is the soundtrack. I'm expecting to hear some funky bangers based on my expectation from Auto Modellista, but to my surprise, this game is rather weird with its music selection. Maybe in that respect, it kind of fits with the game itself, because in the end, I found this game to be a bit mediocre. It's functional, it works fine, but there's just nothing special about it. The way progression has been designed is rather mundane, and its attempt to be unique with its line or dual mechanics just leads to the car collectathon that was starting to become popular at the time. There is no overarching story to be told, no cutscenes or anything that could spice things up. Just pure racing and grinding. That being said, there are some things that still need to be mentioned if you're somehow interested in trying the game out for yourself. The emulator for the original Xbox as of currently is still being improved, so the games have varying degree of compatibility. Back when I recorded and made the video covering Forza Motorsport 1, it was one of the titles with issues such as slowdowns and texture errors, so you get the idea of how this could go. Both me and my editor went and collected some footage via emulation. The results are shaky at worst. The game itself is playable, but there's issues with the emulator not being able to handle rendering all 6 vehicles during the championship races. It's only a problem that persists as long as they're on camera, so ironically it's only ever really relevant during the first corner of every race, and whenever the game puts you in a track with tight U-turns. It does result in some cool dynamic slow-mo for replays though. Some parts of Shibuya will also start causing the frame to dip, but not by much. Due to the 3D city assets probably, but again, it's not much of an issue. That is unless you like the bumper cam or the bumper plus action camera variant. I'm not exactly an expert in this technical part, but I'm guessing it's because the game basically has to render the game twice for the rear view mirrors or the cinematic camera, doubling the rendering weight overall. I definitely made a mistake there, but that's what I'm interpreting anyway. So if you are playing this through emulation, my only tip is to just stick with the chase camera and don't have skill issues in regular championship races. Do that and everything should be just fine and dandy. At launch, the game received mixed to positive reviews, with most publications giving it at the lowest a 5 out of 10 to around 8 out of 10s on the highest. Honestly, they sound pretty fair, although an 8 out of 10 definitely sounds way too high. A 5 or 6 kinda feels fair since the game itself is rather average if I have to be brutally honest. Sales wise though, from what I've seen through VG charts, which is likely not accurate, the game sold around 20,000 copies in the US alone. That's an okay number for a small and rather obscure title, but the total amount of budget spent on the game is unknown currently. There's a chance quite a sum was spent for the car licensing, but it's also possible some of the licenses was something they had with Auto Modellista. Would I recommend the game though? It depends. If you really have nothing to do or any other game to play and are looking for something new to try out, then maybe. The weird thing about this title is that it actually came out a year after Auto Modellista, which was significantly more interesting to play and experience due to its unique cel shading art style and soundtrack collection. Plus, that game had a bit more mechanics to chew on with the way its handling was designed and some extras like the garage decoration feature, or even with the fact the cars in that game are visually customizable with decals and body kits, not to mention being more convenient to emulate since it's available on 3 different hardwares. I'd recommend that game over this anytime someone asks, but if you're interested then go right ahead. But do let me know your opinions in the comments down below. Leave a like and a sub if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.